Urquhart Stewart, one of the founders of Seven Investment Management. Thank you very much for interrupting your busy schedule.
My pleasure.
As you know, I'm looking at how companies are fighting back against the adverse conditions that this recession has brought about. And we know the world is changing politically and economically and testing us with issues that many businesses in the UK have never seen before. But it also offers opportunities, and some companies are looking to take advantage of those, both here in the UK and overseas. Businesses don't like uncertainty, so there are a couple of areas I'd like to discuss with you. I may touch on the euro crisis later, but where do you see the opportunities coming from in the next few years for UK businesses outside Europe?
Yes, and the most important point is that companies need to have confidence that they can actually do something, because there are opportunities there. And unfortunately, of course, we're up against the media the entire time telling us that apparently we're heading for yet more recessionary or weak periods, when in fact underneath it we do know the economy is moving. No, we have to look for those opportunities, and there are opportunities outside Britain, outside the euro area, and if you go to those emerging and developing nations, you can split them up into different areas. The world is going to be a lower, slower place, but there is still going to be demand from the rising middle class in these countries. Not the dramatic rise you've seen, say, in China and India over the past few years. That's easing off a bit, but it's still going to be there.
Yes.
So good quality brand names, good quality products. Now, British brand names, and Britain carries a lot of weight, much more weight overseas than we see internally.
Yes. Yes.
And so with that, that's an opportunity to be able to see that. And at the same time, also looking at those parts of engineering and manufacturing which we can do, which they can't necessarily do. And again, some great examples you see in Britain, but particularly in terms of steel manufacturing and high-end drilling and construction. There again, but it's quite difficult then to be able to identify where these markets are. And so I'm afraid you need to be able to carry out the research through that. And sometimes it means going out there and doing that research, and it can be quite a brave decision and of course a financial investment in order to go out there and have a look. But there is demand, and these days you can establish much more of that demand over the net to be able to see where areas of those economies are growing. So I'm a believer of in developing nations middle class developing, and in terms of the facilities and services they need, sometimes quite basic, sometimes more sophisticated.
Yes.
Also in terms of agrochemical development, in terms of food requirements and such like, again, that is going to be an increasing demand as well. And these are all areas where they look to countries like Britain to have that expertise, and they wish to be able to buy those.
So it is more the advanced, the quality end of manufacturing as well as services.
Yes, what we're never going to be doing is actually trying to compete, nor should we, at the low, cheap end of doing it. After all, they will have the cheaper labour, although some of the cost of that labour is going up. Britain is really well known for our services, if it's in legal, accounting services, financial services. Despite our domestic problems with financial services, it has a high reputation elsewhere around the world. That is good for all British businesses because you're automatically given a mark of strength, because obviously you've got an accounting system which is more reliable than others would necessarily see. So that's a great plus for us to be able to have. But go follow the money. Where is the money being spent? It may be less than it was, less enthusiastically it was, but it still will be spent. Middle classes tend not to stop.
And is that the same within Europe? So if we're looking at the global climate, the global climate is talking about growth of the middle classes wherever in the globe we are, wherever in the world we are. Is that the same within Europe?
Europe is quite different, because quite often you're dealing with more sophisticated nations here, developed nations often like Britain. But also they vary again, because you may have the developed Western European nations, you go to Eastern Europe and you go to the Baltic states, they're developing fast, but they haven't got to the same levels as yet. Now, you're going to see still more consumer demand there, but at a weaker level. You have to bear in mind the Eurozone overall at the moment, when you look at the peripheral nations, are going through an appalling time. They are not going to be resolved for another decade at least. The Eurozone overall, and look at the stronger nations, Benelux and Germany, France is going to have a more difficult time. There will be a pickup over the next few years, but it's low and slow because we grind out the debt. But nonetheless, the euro is still going to be there. And they will start moving towards having more growth in there, if only for one reason, to try and make sure that the social integrity of some of those nations is actually held together. You cannot have a country with 5 years of recession in Greece with another 5 years of recession ahead
Yeah.
without someone trying to find a brick to throw at somebody. And I have to say, if I were in their position, I think I'd try and find a brick too.
Yes, yes. And talking of, excuse me, talking of the euro crisis, where do you believe it is going from here?
Well, I don't believe the euro is going to disappear anytime soon. And that's not me talking about some glorious political statement. Mm-hmm. It's actually based financially. You look where the debt is currently held in the Eurozone at the moment, and the answer is mostly with the European Central Bank. Who owns most of the European Central Bank? Well, 27% of it is with the Germans. So they're already on the hook. Germany benefits from the euro and the Eurozone, but they're not going to pay for countries that have squandered money and having early retirement and paying for generous pensions. Discipline and austerity needs to be in there, but tempered also with the level of growth. Yes. So the euro is going to be there because it's much a political structure as it is a financial structure. And Germany has benefited from, in terms of its trade, and as its trade is slowing down externally in places like China, so it will want the Eurozone to succeed. However, it means that for us exporting to Europe, we need to look very carefully again at what we need. You're looking again high-end areas of development in terms of manufacturing, engineering. You're looking also at the high-quality end of services as well. But are you dealing with sort of mass retail and those sort of areas dealing with those sort of elements of the consumer market? No, that's going to be very weak and will be for some time to come. So it'll be those areas, but you have to be really quite particular. But look at the strengths of what we've got. Remember, Britain is still the world's 7th, 8th largest manufacturer. And so in terms of engineering, how much we are exporting into Euroland because they need that expertise. There is more to come there. And so that's what we should focus on.
And as we come out of recession, what do you anticipate the areas and the issues to be for companies that are now beginning to grow and come out of this UK recession and this world recession?
I think the most dangerous thing for any growing company is actually growing, or more to the point, the cost of growing. Because we all want to grow and we all want to go and get the big order and be able to see the business coming through. I have seen more businesses fail through lack of blood, lack of cash flow, and that's what kills them. And bear in mind, banks aren't there to provide capital. Banks were always there to provide cash flow support. And funny enough, the banks aren't doing it. So now we have to be more imaginative and finding ways of doing it. There are some old-fashioned ways of doing it, such as being able to utilize mechanisms so you can actually discount your invoices. And be able to use those elements. They can vary in cost over time, but there's ways of doing that. And then you can also try and find other ways, either working with your suppliers, or there are other areas now. We've got other mechanisms through the internet we're seeing of crowd financing, industry group financing, getting together with other companies in your area to try and mutually assist each other with different orders. This may seem rather odd, but we're in an odd world. Things are changing, so we have to change as well. But that doesn't mean it stops. And I think this actually, it's what you'll find in moments like this, people do become more imaginative and will say, I need this order, how do I finance it? Let me work with the people who's supplying me or I'm supplying, see how it's financed. Also getting almost together mutual groups of companies to self-finance their own business. So one time you're financing one company for trade, the next time maybe another company. And you'll find that operating within groups and regions and financial hubs, that needs to be fostered and developed. It doesn't happen overnight, but it comes from local business groups getting together.
Yes. Is there any other areas where you think UK businesses can help themselves?
There's a lot I think we can do in trying to, I suppose, lift our eyes up. The problem is we go home every night, we see the television, and they'll tell us the bad news. They'll tell us that the employment isn't doing very well, that investment isn't doing very well. I have to say, when I go around the country, I very rarely come across companies saying that they're doomed. They've adjusted, they've changed, they've cut their cloth accordingly, but they're doing okay. Almost sometimes slightly embarrassed. They'd say they're doing really rather well, but don't tell anybody because they feel that's almost out of kilter with everybody else. So actually what people need to be doing is actually taking a look at very clearly in terms of cost control, manage your costs absolutely clearly, and make sure it's more flexible, because the great thing these days, you don't have to have great long order books coming through, you don't have to maintain huge amounts of stock, lots of short-term elements, so your cash control is absolutely vital. Now, if you can be doing that and be moving deftly and swiftly on your feet, and in many ways not having the bank there means that we have to be more deft and more swift, actually will make us into better business people, I believe.
Yes. That's lovely. Thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure.
Justin Urquhart Stewart, founder of Seven Investment Management here in the heart of the City of London. Thank you.
Thank you, Marj.